All right, coming at you live, not from the lower bottoms of West Oakland, but from the hills of East Oakland. This is the coronavirus shelter-in-place special edition of Sound Waves. And since I am doing this at home, we have a very special guest on this episode, and that special guest is clinical specialist.
This is very interesting. What do I do?
You were a clinical operations manager, specialist. Now what are you?
I'm a clinical operations manager for the insomnia program at a startup medical device company.
There you go. Jessica Bautista, the Jessica that I always refer to as my girlfriend Jessica, and I are doing this podcast from home. Unfortunately, there will be some home sounds like our dog, Stilton, who barks whenever Jessica's sister walks up the stairs. So if you hear the dog barking...
And a niece and nephew.
Dad, yes, will be screaming, "Hi, Jason! Jason, hi, Jason!" But that's the keeping it real sounds. Also, I don't know if you guys do this, but please comment if you do. Our son wakes up without fail 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning. We go get him. We put him in our room hoping he goes back to sleep. He does not go back to sleep because it's not in his baby makeup anymore to go back to sleep. That little motherfucker is up and he's ready to party. So
but he sleeps through the night. You got to give him that.
He has been sleeping through the night. He has been. And he went in the living room where we have a television, and he managed to turn the TV on from the box. Actually, he turned like the satellite box on, and he started watching Cheaters. I don't know if this happens to you guys, but I've never purposely like sat down to watch Cheaters. I've never thought to myself, let's watch Cheaters. But I will say that it's been on, Jesus Christ, for like 6 hours straight right now.
I mean, it's a classic show.
How many fucking seasons did they do?
I mean, I'm pretty sure it entertained me during the course of my high school career.
I'm just amazed.
At least 4 years.
I'm amazed that this many people have gotten caught. Like after the first couple seasons, because they film it in Texas. It's all in the same region of Texas. So it's like,
be a little smarter.
Be smarter with your cheating.
Be more clever.
Jesus.
Or don't do it. If you start to see a swarm of people coming,
tell the truth, Jesse.
9 times out of 10, it's the cheaters crew, and if you're doing something you shouldn't be doing, you just need to flee.
Yeah, like I said, I don't understand how these people continuously get caught. Some of it looks kind of fake, and now they're on their third host, and the third host's name is Clark Gable. Joey Greco is gone, and Clark Gable is the host. But Clark Gable definitely follows in the Cheaters host tradition of trying to make people feel like utter shit by exploiting.
But he doesn't do it as convincingly.
He kind of has this air about him, like he's gonna fuck some people after the show. Like he's either gonna fuck the cheatee or the cheater, but someone's getting fucked by Clark Gable.
I wouldn't be surprised.
He kind of has that "I'm going to fuck your girlfriend" look about him. Like that's how he got the job. Like he was one of the guys that was like banging somebody's wife. They're like, "You gotta look, kid. You're gonna be a star." That being said, we do have a show today that we wanted to do, Jessica and I, because we are stuck here together.
stuck.
Stuck.
I love that word.
Stuck in the middle with you.
We're stuck.
And she's been working from home, and she's been seeing me watch Trump press conferences. I do as much research as I can for this show, and a lot of it sometimes revolves around me reading way too much and watching these Trump press conferences. And now we've been watching them together. And how do you feel about Trump press conferences at this point, Jessica? What's your take from it?
I find it pretty entertaining watching them with you, primarily because you're able to point out the subtle facial expressions that his team has in the background when he's going off script. So the coordinator of the coronavirus, Deborah Birx, is very relieved when doctors and the other politicians are speaking, but has a very almost constipated look when Trump is
she looks like I said this on Facebook. She looks like, and Mike Pence as well. They both look like the face I make when a fart sneaks out on a crowded BART train, and I'm hoping no one knows it's me. And I try to look serious, like there is no fart.
And they're looking at each other to find comfort in what's going on.
Yeah, like, wait a minute, did someone fart? Was it me that farted? So that's the face that I feel they make. But one of the things that Trump said that kind of is going to make the rounds is he continuously calls the coronavirus the Chinese virus. And a photographer yesterday or day before yesterday, minutes feel like hours. Let's just be honest. So I can't remember if it was yesterday or the day before yesterday.
Or 2 minutes ago.
Maybe. Took a picture of Trump's speech. And in that picture, you see where it was written coronavirus and Trump crossed out corona and wrote Chinese. And one thing that Donald Trump loves to do is like berate journalists that question him when he can't answer the question, which is a little more often than you think. If people bother to watch any Trump press conference instead of just watching like the comical highlights on a Daily Show or something like that, or not Jon Stewart, what's the guy's name? John Oliver, one of those guys that tell it for you. Like when you actually watch the press conference, it's really disgusting how much he doesn't know. So when he goes off script, he just starts making shit up. And reporters, it almost seems like they're scared to say anything. And then his staff, it's almost like his staff has to come on stage and thank the supreme ruler. Like the moment the staff comes, they're like, "Thank you, Mr. President, for your amazing leadership in this time of need." They always have some like, "Thank you, honorable ruler."
Or defending the president.
Yeah.
When reporters are questioning them about the decisions that Trump has made or lack thereof.
Definitely lack thereof. But the Chinese virus became a question by a reporter. Like a reporter said, "Why do you keep calling it the Chinese virus?" One reporter was actually told, a Trump staffer called it a Kung flu to an Asian reporter. When that was brought to Trump's attention, his answer was, "Hey, the virus started in China. It's a Chinese virus. It's not racist. Next question." And there's not a lot of follow-up because also, too, these people are trying to get all of their questions in the very small amount of time they have to deal with this guy. I mean, keep in mind, again, if you don't watch this press conference, you don't see, he spends the first half of it berating his opponents, telling people how wonderful he is, lying about what he's about to do. There's millions of tests. He knew about it before everyone else. He didn't know about it. He was surprised. Then he'll read his speech, which he's usually really bad at. And it's just what's the word I'm looking for? It's frustrating. That's not the word I'm looking for, but it's frustrating to watch.
Well, it's a shit show, is what it is.
Yes. And I remember the Bush era. I remember the Reagan era. Even Ronald Reagan tried to get on top of Iran-Contra. Trump is doing nothing other than trying to deflect. And his main thing to deflect to for the whole course of his presidency has been the economy, but not the real economy. It's always been like, look at the stock market. Or if he tries to point to the real economy, it's numbers. He uses numbers that he actually ran to the left of during his presidency, during his candidacy run. So if you remember, when people were bringing up, especially the Democratic Party, or when Hillary Clinton would bring up the unemployment numbers or the employment numbers, they were good, but also the way we look at unemployment, if you've been out of work for, I think it's 18 months, you're no longer counted. So there's millions of people that just aren't counted in those numbers. So he called that out because Bernie called that out. So watching him he rarely points to those numbers now. Then he was pointing to the stock market forever because the stock market is doing good because of those tax cuts. Now, the trillions of dollars of tax cuts that he made that was supposed to trickle down to the people in the form of pay raises, research and development, never happened. The airline industry is getting, was it a $50 billion bailout?
Oh, were they?
Yeah, that they're asking for in this coronavirus
But are they
stimulus.
getting it?
I believe so. There's a very small amount that's actually going to people. But let's get back on topic, which is the Chinese virus. Viruses it has a name. It's called the coronavirus. COVID-19, or as the scientists or doctors are calling it, SARS-2. But no one's calling it the Chinese virus. Trump is calling it the Chinese virus to weaponize that title. And there was a Facebook thread that I saw where someone had said something along the lines of the virus originated in China. I'm calling it the Chinese virus. I'm not racist for calling it the Chinese virus.
That was pretty much the whole justification. It came from China.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's the Chinese virus.
Like China made it. Like that was kind of the gist that I got from it. China made it. Therefore, I'm not a bad person for calling it the Chinese virus. What is your take when people say things like that?
I think it's just their lack of knowledge and understanding, kind of viruses can be developed anywhere. It just so happened to have developed in China.
Or we found it.
We
discovered it, yeah.
Well, this outbreak happened in China.
Okay.
I think along the thread of the post that you found, there was the counter was, we call Chinese food, so is that being racist? No. But kind of, that's a very poor argument just because Chinese food, Chinese cuisine, is made from the ingredients that originated from China. The technique is used from that country, so it makes sense to call it Chinese cuisine. But saying,
and there's no negative connotations.
There's no
to it.
negative connotation. When you say Chinese virus, you're basically pointing the blame, stigmatizing a particular group, and just creating a negative space.
The original post said, "This virus originated from China. It is not racist to call it a Chinese virus. In fact, many call it the Wuhan or Chinese virus from the very beginning, including both Dems, Republicans." It actually says reps. I guess that's Republicans. And several news sources, etc. COVID-19, Corona, Wuhan, or Chinese, doesn't matter. We're all in this together, whether you like it or not. Hashtag be kind to each other. Hashtag stop negativity. Hashtag positivity breeds positivity. Hashtag we'll get through this. I think this post kind of shows that real interesting headspace that people stay in, where it's like, I'm going to do something racist, but if I put this positive spin to it, then it's not racist. Like Ben Carson can enact racist policies and back up racist policies as the head of HUD, and he's black, so therefore it's not racist. Like that's such a, more so a democratic thing to do. Well, did a woman do it? Therefore it's all good. If positivity breeds positivity, then if you think someone's offended by something, why would you then try to justify you offending them? That's how I look at it. So it's kind of annoying when people are like, hey, be kind to each other, but I'm just going to use this racist slur to shit all over you. But by the way, I'm doing it with a smile, therefore it's not offensive. I don't think this person is, also another hashtag was stop negativity, which I think is hilarious. Basically saying, hey, I want to be offensive with the way I treat this horrible disease, and stop being negative to me being negative. But I guess that means you're being positive. But
two negatives make positive.
Two negatives make, I guess that's what it means. It's all science. But the conversation or the thread definitely devolved into an extremely racist conversation. And you had said, we were having this conversation when we first saw the thread last night, you said, what do people call it in China? And I think that's like one of the best things to say to someone like that. Like, well, hey, what do you think people call this in China? You think they call it the R virus? Or do you think they call it coronavirus in their language?
Or the COVID-19?
Exactly. So that whole like, I'm just calling it like I see it. Okay, well. And then part of the thread was these examples of diseases that are named after regions. The Spanish flu, the German measles, West Nile virus, MERS, etc. The term oversimplification, when we get into racist arguments, is underused. These people totally oversimplify these things. Like, it happened in China, me calling it the Chinese virus isn't bad. And you have to say, well, don't you think that this country has a negative relationship with China? I mean, did everyone forget, or did the people in this thread forget, or not really be that informed on this tariff battle, the unnecessary tariff battle that Donald Trump had with China at the start of his presidency, that actually cost a lot of American farmers millions. Businesses were really hurting from it. The Spanish flu, and no one has responded to the post I made on the thread, that is, the Spanish flu started in Kansas. First reported case of Spanish flu is in Kansas. No one had a comeback to that.
Because it just kind of wipes out anything that they have to say about their side of the debate? Like, there's no, how do you come back from that?
The Google warriors, I think when people, and I call them Google warriors, when you can't have this conversation like face to face, like you have to have it behind a screen, because the things that we're talking about are things you just don't know about, and you have to Google everything. When you're Googling everything, you're looking for that confirmation bias. You're not reading entire articles. You're just looking for a headline. You're looking for a wiki page.
But going back to the post, it doesn't even seem like they did too much research.
None at all.
So it's kind of an example of implicit bias.
Yes.
And how your subconscious pretty much affects how you interact in certain situations. And not being aware of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, obviously, if you ask this person if they knew about implicit bias and how they think it's affecting the way that they're posting about the coronavirus, they probably won't have anything to say.
No. I don't think anyone believes that the actions they commit are offensive or racist because of their associations with people of color and the way media, in my opinion, has treated the system of racism as not a system of laws and policies that keep a certain group of people down, but as the actions of a few. We actually had recorded a podcast earlier that didn't get saved.
This is take two.
This is take two. But in take one, I actually talked about the movie Mississippi Burning and movies of that ilk, where it was like some black people wanted to do this kind of benign thing, like swim in a fucking public pool, and then some white man for no reason says like, no niggas is gonna swim in my pool, and then there's a movie about it, and Disney does it, and you cry at the end. And maybe
but that actually happened in real life, right?
Kind of.
There was a family who swam in a pool, and this guy took out his camera and basically tried to interrogate the family because they were black and he had never seen them before. And it's just kind of...
I don't think that was what that movie was about. The movie was about like a swim team.
Oh. But
that shit probably... Oh, yeah. I mean, there's pictures of... and I think it was even portrayed in a movie, and I can't remember the movie. It wasn't Sammy Davis Jr. I think it was like Dorothy Dandridge was swimming. The actress, the late actress Dorothy Dandridge, was swimming in a pool in Vegas. And I don't know if people know that Vegas was extremely segregated and, Jesus, up until like the 60s. And so when all these black performers would be coming in to do their Vegas review shows, this is like the high time of the mob, black people weren't allowed in the pool. And if you're Dorothy Dandridge getting paid a good amount of money to entertain a boatload of motherfuckers, and you can't get in the pool, and you want to, you're tired of this shit, and you get in the pool, and the hotel manager starts pouring bleach in the pool. Like, that's the kind of shit that was happening. But again, that seems like the actions of a person and not a system in place. If you watch Mississippi Burning, you forget why the FBI is down there, because they don't really talk about it that much. It becomes this cat and mouse game of the police that's corrupt and a city council that's corrupt. It's a corruption story that you can see on Law and Order. But you don't understand how deep those roots go. There's a great ESPN piece on, I'm a huge sports fan, on a guy that never really made it in the pros named Marcus Dupree. Marcus Dupree was born the year those civil rights workers died. So let's also get that straight. Mississippi Burning takes place when there is a lot of white college students from the North because school was cheap, if not free, that wanted to make a change in society came to the South to help black people register to vote, because there was crazy voter registration laws at the time. So 2 white civil rights workers, voter organizers, and 1 black gentleman that was driving them around got murdered by the police force. And it was covered up by the city council. They were all Klan members. Now, the sheriff of that police force, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, later became the head of the committee that gives people their commercial driver's licenses. And when this football player, Marcus Dupree, he grew up with this sheriff's son. When his NFL career was over, and it was over relatively quickly, he had to go to his best friend's dad, who's literally the guy who was a part of the murder of these civil rights workers, and say, hey, can I get my commercial driver's license? And the guy was like, of course you can. You're Marcus Dupree. You're the greatest athlete that's ever come out of these parts. And you're my son's best friend. Why would I not? Think about that for a second. How ingrained racism was in that system, is in that system, that the sheriff was just kind of almost doing what he was told. It was just the way things were. Once that system changes slightly, then, oh yeah, you can give this dude the ability to earn a living. It's no big deal. No big deal. Why would I not? We don't see it as systems. We see it as like these acts of really heinous individuals, right? The help. We don't really understand the undertaking that was the Montgomery bus boycotts and how important that was. We don't see the decades of work that happened. We see, and I have a dream speech about, I just want my kids to play with your kids, which is what it gets boiled down to. And then we see Barack Obama and Oprah Winfrey and successful black people and go, isn't everything equal now? And through that equality, now I'm going to be racist as shit because we're all equal now. And that's just not how it works. That's not what racism is. I don't think being a racist is who you are. It's not what defines you. You can go in and out of racist thought, of racist actions. I feel the same way about xenophobia and homophobia. You know, I've definitely said homophobic things that I don't agree with today. You know, we can be in and out of this train of thought. But this conversation, this thread, definitely devolved into a highly offensive conversation. It went from be kind to each other, why can't I say this racist thing, to at one point someone's like, you know, these people, because of their communistic government, eat bats and rats and cats because they don't have anything to eat. Not understanding how viruses spread or where they stem from. Did you want to talk anything about that? Viruses? Coronavirus?
Well, just for the people who don't really understand how viruses are spread. So basically the coronavirus comes from along the same virus, it's the same virus family as like SARS.
SARS too.
And MERS. And so for this virus, sometimes viruses can be airborne, where there's small droplets in the air where people come into contact with, they inhale, and then that's how they contract the virus. The coronavirus is actually large droplets. So large droplets come from either the person's nose in the form of mucus or a cough in the form of either mucus or saliva. And a person can contract it within about 6 feet from the person who has been infected. And that's how you kind of contract it. And so
I just found out that there's effects on this, so I'm sorry. I'm gonna lose my shit. So there you go. There you go.
But yeah, just a little info for those who don't know how viruses
And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Contracted.
And also, I don't think people understand the whole, like when people say that it comes from bats, how that works. No one's eating bats and fucking bats to get coronavirus. Bats, fruit bats for the most part, like to be in higher elevation. As our climate is constantly getting destroyed and these bat habitats are being destroyed, they have to come down to lower levels. They have a much better immune system than us. From Science Daily, some bats, including those known to be the original source of human infections, have been shown to host immune systems that are perpetually primed to mount defenses against viruses. Viral infection in these bats leads to a swift response that walls virus out of cells. While this may protect the bats from getting infected with high viral loads, it encourages these viruses to reproduce more quickly within a host before a defense can be mounted. This makes bats a unique reservoir of rapidly reproducing and highly transmissible viruses. While the bats can tolerate viruses like these, when these bat viruses then move into animals that lack a fast response immune system, the viruses quickly overwhelm their new hosts, leading to high fatality rates. Now keep in mind, a bat, we're talking about a bat crapping, pissing, spitting on a cow's food, chicken feed, and it destroying the chicken. So much so that by the time it touches a human hand, it's in the human hand and causing destruction in the human body. I might be able to put links on this since we're not doing it from the studio. I don't know if I can put a link, but I'll try to put a link so you guys can see everything here as far as like the links for where we're getting the information from. That being said, when the thread totally devolved into like the highly racist language of people eating bats and things like that, then the justification became more and more for calling it the Chinese virus. Like, see, these people started it. Again, not really understanding that viruses have no home of origin.
Well, I think a lot of it is just kind of going back to this ideal of implicit bias. You know, the post was made not intending to invoke the conversation that it did, I think. I think the person was just trying to create what he thought was insightful, and it just kind of went down from there. And so if you think about race, for me, I feel like racism falls more along the lines of a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So on one end, you have not necessarily no racist, but a person kind of acting through everyday life on an implicit bias status. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have people who are just kind of just outright racist.
Mm-hmm.
And so depending on how the person, where the person is and reacts to certain situations and groups of people, that person can scale back and forth on
Exactly.
either end of the spectrum. So when he received responses to his post that he thought was a challenge, it just kind of, he felt like he had to defend his post, and it, as you put it, kind of devolved and snowballed into something really
Yeah.
nasty.
And it only takes like one person of an ethnicity to give these people the confirmation that they need that these things are saying that aren't racist. And I think you have to first and foremost say, before we even get into the conversation, Asian people can be racist against Asian people. Black people can hold racist beliefs, the same beliefs as white people. So leaning on your Asian brother-in-law is not going to give you the out on this to say horrible things. Your gay best friend is not giving you carte blanche to call everybody a faggot that you don't like, that you think is lame. That being said, if you're calling it the Chinese virus, when it has a name and you feel the need to want to call it the Chinese virus, I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, why do you want to call it the Chinese virus when it has a name?
I mean, I think a lot of people just kind of heard it because it's all over media.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like, well, I don't like Donald Trump, but he's just not being racist here because it's just the Chinese virus, right? And it's like, well, he is, and he's weaponizing it. And if you can't understand when a simpleton like Donald Trump is weaponizing language in an extremely simpleton-like manner, then maybe we should have a conversation, because that's a problem. That's why we're in the situation we're in, because everybody goes, oh, I don't see the problem with it. There's black people that are like, oh, I don't see the problem with it. What's the problem?
I mean, I think it's just people's lack of critical thinking. Like, the media calls it Chinese virus, the president of the United States is calling it Chinese virus, so it's called the Chinese virus. Just like the German measles was called the German measles, and making that association. Even the association is wrong.
Yeah.
They don't feel the need to do any further research because it looks good, it sounds
Bam,
good.
there it is. German, measles, done. And it's like, no, dude, you're not done. Spanish flu was first discovered in Kansas. German measles is German measles because 3 German scientists and doctors, I don't want to say discovered it, but they discovered it and confirmed it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the name is deeper. This name is totally being weaponized against China. So. Thank you. Hold on. Again, the original question, what do you think people call it in China? And then you can even pull back and say, look, dude, you know this government has a bad relationship with China. So you really think a guy like Donald Trump is looking at this situation, who's handled it very poorly, who has yelled at every journalist that has questioned anything he's done? You really think he's calling it the Chinese virus just cuz? Settle down. Of course he's not calling it the Chinese virus just cuz. He's calling it the Chinese virus because it deflects from any conversation about what's going on right now, which is a term journalist Naomi Klein coined, disaster capitalism, in her book, The Shock Doctrine. A shock happens to the system, a hurricane, an earthquake. She wrote her book during Katrina, so Katrina happened, and the entire public school system is turned into a charter school system overnight. A shock happens to the system. Capitalists come in to make money from said shock. The intercept just published an article. Li Fong wrote it, who's a great journalist. He lives here in the Bay Area, where they had the investor calls in the article, where these pharmaceutical companies are happy about the coronavirus, not just because of the profits they're going to make, because there's no regulations on what they can charge for any sort of vaccines or any sort of medications for it. They're happy because it's taking away from all the opioid crisis lawsuits they've been losing. And they're literally laughing about it. That is what Donald Trump is deflecting from whenever he says Chinese virus. When he says Chinese virus, when he says things like Obama put me in this position, which is very odd, being that the Obama administration's response to the Ebola outbreak, which Donald Trump was extremely critical of, which he said, and I quote, a medical professional should be in charge in this time of need.
I mean, you saw him in all of those press conferences.
He was asked that question in the press conference.
He has he has no information to provide or words of support.
No.
And so he has this team of people.
He'll tell you how persecuted he is.
So that he can facilitate the conversation by referring to another person. But
tell it, girl.
I want to throw a curveball at you.
Okay.
So, our son's daycare center sent me a text just now.
Our son also goes to a Chinese daycare. He's learning Chinese.
I'm not sure where the source is, but she wanted to inform me that Homeland Security is preparing to mobilize the National Guard, preparing to dispatch them across the U.S. along with military. They will also call in first responders. They are preparing to announce a nationwide 2-week quarantine for all citizens. All businesses will be closed. Everyone will be at home. They will announce this as soon as they have troops in place to help prevent looters and rioters. They will announce before the end of the weekend that within 48 to 72 hours, the president will evoke what is called the Stafford Act.
Yeah. Well, I haven't seen anything about that. And we're literally online right now as we speak.
So, I mean, it might be...
The Stafford Act authorizes the president to declare a major disaster or emergency in response to an incident or threatened incident that overwhelms the response capability of state or local governments. The Stafford Act declaration can trigger other public health emergency response authorities. I can't see Trump doing that, and I'll tell you why. Here, I'm looking it up now. People have been asking the question.
Originally it was
actually
law, right?
Hold on. Breaking news. Is there a breaking news thing?
Oh, that's not good.
No. Breaking news. Trump enacts Stafford Act to respond to coronavirus cases. Donald Trump said the United States has enacted the Stafford Act to declare a major disaster response to the coronavirus outbreak. President Donald Trump said he was tapping the Defense Production Act to order American businesses to manufacture and send supplies like testing kits, ventilators, and masks to hospitals preparing to be overwhelmed by a wave of coronavirus cases. The president also announced an effective closure of the U.S. border with Mexico. Mexico closed their border a while ago, prohibiting most travel except for trade. That brings it in line with the restrictions on the Canadian border. The U.S. is also suspending interest on student loans to help young people cope. How old is this story? This story is from today. 4 minutes ago. I wrote a piece last week, and we did a show last week called "This is Trump's Herbert Hoover Moment." And he's hoovering it up right now. And I look at Herbert Hoover as a complex president because he definitely had some great infrastructure projects that we still use today. Hoover Dam, the Bay Bridge, stop signs, traffic lights. I mean, that's all Herbert Hoover. That being said, his big failure was the bonus march, where tens of thousands of soldiers got burnt out at a camp, and not helping the American people directly, thinking that helping business would trickle down to the people, because he found helping people somewhat crippling.
But that's not what Trump's really doing.
Not at all. But that was Hoover's biggest failure. And when he could have...
He had good intentions at heart. Would you say that?
Yeah. But he also didn't listen to people. I mean, he also had a tariff bill that was horrible, that fucked up trade. He also didn't handle the market well. There's a few parallels to them, but I say this is his big fuck up moment, because there's so many people that don't trust government. We have been fighting a war, or I shouldn't say we, the Republican Party, since the Goldwater administration, or not even administration, since Barry Goldwater ran for president in what, 64? You know, the staunch right winger that is the grandfather of like Reagan era, Thatcher era conservatism. Hillary Clinton was a Goldwater girl, right? It took how many years did it take for him? Almost 20 years for that to set in place the Reagan era, where Reagan says, what was his quote? Basically, Reagan, I'm going to paraphrase, it was like, big government is the problem. Too much government intervention is the problem. Bill Clinton doubles down on that. Mm-hmm. The era of big government is over. So there's this kind of, I don't trust the government in people. And Donald Trump ran as a Washington outsider. I'm going to give you your freedom. And if you've been reading any of the stories that have come out about this bill to help people that are stuck at home that don't have work, a lot of people in the Republican Party didn't want checks to go out to people, because that goes against the Republican Party ethos of bootstrapping and pulling yourself up and helping business help people. So I can't see someone and a party of the era of big government is over literally use all the forms of big government to oppress the people. It's one of those, you're not going to win because you're going to have bodies on your hands, whether you like it or not. The closer we get to November, when this thing is all over and the bodies start piling up, and they all won't say coronavirus, it'll be pneumonia, it'll be flu, it'll be respiratory complications, it'll be a myriad of reasons that won't be COVID-19, mainly because we can't test for it. That will become the Democratic Party talking point. More than the Democratic Party talking point, it's going to be the progressive Democratic Party talking point. People like Shahid Buttar, people like Bernie Sanders were already saying it. It's going to be A, your inaction, and B, the fact you didn't want to test anybody so we could like really control this thing.
Well, at this point, I don't think it's them not wanting to test people. I think at this point it's we don't have the capacity to do so.
No.
We're not trying to partner with any other countries. Mm-mm. We apparently want to buy Germany's vaccine that they've been working on and have exclusive rights to it. But just kind of going back to this late breaking news as far as enacting the Stafford Act. Thus far, Trump hasn't really done anything to kind of support the well-being of citizens.
No. And also keep in mind with the acts that he's enacted, his role, government can start telling businesses, private enterprises, much like during the World War II New Deal era, stop producing cars and make tanks. So you can say, stop producing masks for Amazon, start producing masks for medical professionals that are out of masks, gowns, beds, etc. Our government doesn't have the capacity of the Chinese government to build a hospital in 6 days. We don't. The system we live in, like it or not, people, does not have the capacity to build a hospital for 1,000 people in 6 days. Our government dismantled the unit that was the smoke detector for pandemics. And then when they knew about it, decided to do nothing. And if you've been following these Republican senators and congresspeople that cashed out their stock before the market crashed because they knew how bad coronavirus was going to be, that should let you know. That should be the telling sign that this administration knew and did care. And again, this is going to be a progressive and Democratic Party talking point moving forward into the general election. And also moving forward, when the president calls it the Chinese virus, again, if you don't understand why he's using that terminology and why he's saying, I'm at war, he's trying to say, he even said it in the press conference, I'm a wartime president, and this is a war against this virus. Who's the enemy? The enemy isn't the virus.
Well, he calls it the invisible enemy.
It's the Chinese invisible enemy, right? America needs a villain. I'm 43. I love Red Dawn. I cry at the same scene in Red Dawn every time I watch it.
What's that?
The scene where Patrick Swayze and what's the other guy that was on?
I've never watched it.
What's the white boy? Charlie Sheen. And they're seeing their dad. And he's telling them about, basically kind of giving him his last words because he's in a concentration camp because he was a rebel.
Mm-hmm.
But Red Dawn is a movie about Cuba and the Russians taking over America. It sounds crazy. It is crazy. Because Russia and America fought proxy wars against each other in various parts of the globe, but they never fought each other head up like that. Russia was our ally through the first two world wars. And I don't think most people understand that. But we needed an enemy in the 80s during the Cold War. Communism was the enemy. What happens when you don't have an enemy? Well, for a while, the enemy was government after the Cold War. Well, Trump's in office. And he definitely was one of the proponents of the government's an enemy for years from the outside, just talking shit. I don't see him declaring war on the people like that. I see it more through measures of like trying to control certain industries, trying to take some sort of stake or ownership share, not to nationalize them for the public good, but to see how much he can profit from them. Like I could imagine him being so dumb that they were like, well, you know, you can nationalize an industry, and him being like, word, like we can take it over, like I can make money from this. He hasn't stopped making money from his own businesses.
Yeah.
No, let's get this straight. So I can see him just not getting it. So thank you. Thank you. But kind of in closing, it's not the Chinese virus, it has a name. COVID-19, SARS-2, coronavirus, but the Chinese virus is meant to be offensive. And if you're saying it, if you're fighting to say it, if you just want to say it, step back for a second and ask yourself why you feel so justified in saying that. Like, what is the rationale behind you wanting to call this thing the Chinese virus? If we've already established that origins of virus don't necessarily correlate with their names, why then would you want to call it the Chinese virus? Jessica, any parting words?
I guess to piggyback on what you're saying, the pointing of the finger to people who look like they're Chinese or are Chinese or live in Chinatown, you are just as likely to get COVID-19 from your next door neighbor who looks as European and all-American as they come.
Mm-hmm.
So it crosses racial lines, it crosses ethnic origins. America is supposed to be the melting pot. So just know to wash your hands, do the elbow bump. Apparently we have to stock up on supplies. So
because we're never leaving here.
Wishing everyone safety these next 2 weeks, and to, if not already, do more critical thinking on these hot topics that Jason comes with on these.
And I'll end this with the hashtags that were in the thread that were: be kind to each other, stop negativity, remember positivity breeds positivity, and we will get through this. Thank you.